Hi everyone, I'm Ariel Kagan. I work at Minnesota Farmers Union, but I've been a MinneAg coordinator since the beginning, and it's followed me through many jobs. Though I'm here with my Farmers Union hat on, I'm also here with my MinneAg hat on because I think this is it's a really important effort that is both organizational and also relationship based. I live outside of the Twin Cities in St. Croix Valley, and I'm really excited to share some updates from MinneAg with you all today. And I'll pass it over to Laura.
Hi everyone, good to be with you today. My name is Laura Schreiber. I work at the Land Stewardship Project as our Government Relations Director. And yes, I've been connected to MinneAg for the last 4 years or so. And I'm based in Northeast Minneapolis and lead our policy work at the Capitol for LSP.
And I am Erin McKee. I'm the Community Food Systems Program Director at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, which is where MinneAg is currently housed. And this is such a special project. I'm so excited to be engaged with all of you in this work to better our farm and food systems in Minnesota.
Great. So, what is MinneAg? Many of you have been to MinneAg meetings over the years, and I think we are officially in our fifth year, which is sort of incredible. MinneAg really came out of the pandemic, as many things did, of course, when there were a lot of resources coming into our state to support the impacts of the pandemic. And we wanted to make sure that food and ag organizations that were trying to direct those resources weren't in conflict with each other, and even better, were coordinated and organized so that we could have a shared vision of what we wanted these dollars to do. I would say that was hugely successful, and we saw a lot of fantastic programs like the Local Food Purchase Assistance Program, the Resilient Food Infrastructure Grants. I mean, a lot of these really impactful programs that MinneAg members, organizations that are involved in MinneAg, had conversations about online and in person. And through that process, we're really able to influence how those programs were implemented and rolled out. This also came after many years of talking to colleagues at organizations that maybe don't have a dedicated policy director or a government relations director, who feel like these decisions are being made in St. Paul, and it's hard to know when those decisions are being made, how to influence them, and how to track what really happens and what comes out the other side at the end of session. And so we felt like getting folks together to share information, to build relationships, and to build capacity for policy engagement was really important. One other piece that I felt was important is that there is this idea that nonprofits, that 501c3s can't do policy work. And that's true to a certain extent, but lobbying and policy work are very different. And many of you on this call know that. And we've talked about this many times throughout the years with MinneAg, but education and engagement on policy issues is something that 501c3s can do. Lobbying is a very specific activity where you're asking a decision maker, an elected official, to vote a certain way on a specific bill. And so, there's a whole lot of room up to that point where it's important for organizations who are working with communities that are affected by policy can also affect that policy, right? And so that is a lot of what we have done with MinneAg, is learn more about the ways that organizations can influence those processes. I think another thing that's happened over the past 5 years is MinneAg has become a place where decision makers know that they can come to hear from many groups that have shared values at the same time, can get information out to a broader community, and can be sort of that sounding board and idea generation space. And so over the years, we've, in the MinneAg meetings, had the ag chairs, the commissioner of agriculture. We've had partners from more national organizations that are doing federal policy. And I think that's been also incredibly powerful in creating that shared network of people who are engaged in this and who are seen as a trusted resource to decision makers who aren't thinking about equitable food systems every hour of every day. That's MinneAg, and we've grown over the years. We've changed. We've seen a lot of new people come in. One of the things I'm most proud of with this group is that young people who are starting their careers in food and agriculture in Minnesota and who come to MinneAg meetings, I see them making relationships and then finding their place within this ecosystem. And that's, I think, really rewarding, because I think we all know that Minnesota has a reputation for maybe not being the most open to newcomers. And I think we all know that that's not really true, right? But we just need some structure to help bring people in and get to know each other and each other's organizations and our work and what's important to us. So that's my MinneAg soapbox. Maybe I'll stop there and we can go to the next slide.
Great, thanks, Ariel. Yeah, so diving into, what are the abilities and capacities that we really wanted MinneAg to serve, and Ariel touched on some of them, but the first one being capacity buildings. How can we make it possible for more groups, organizations that, as Ariel said, are not typically maybe as engaged in policy, to kind of create a more transparent process and signal and create a network of people that can be talking with elected officials and people with power that are impacting these policies. So with our network building, having both these meetings, but then also last year we had started with our MinneAg moment, since we know it's not always possible for people to join a Friday call, but has been a really great way for us to share what is going on in the legislature, what's coming up, ways that people can be plugging in through action alerts or notifying if there is a bill coming up that impacts a lot of our communities. For instance, for Farm to School or LFPA, we were able to get a lot of letters of support into committees there. But also with policy engagement and trying to make that a more accessible field for people to be getting into. So we've previously have had listening sessions with folks from MDA, like Commissioner Peterson, to share what are our budget priorities and how do we keep advancing for sustainable agriculture and more equitable food systems. And this has been a really great way through our different issue topics too, being able to do deep dives, and we'll get into our different pillar areas in a moment, but wanting to ground and bringing community into decision-making spaces, since we know policy can be a pretty not clear process and confusing for a lot of people. So how can we make this an entry point and use MinneAg as a resource for each other, and then also expanding, like Ariel was saying, the number of people who can get involved in this work. I'll pass it back, I think, to Ariel.
Yeah, so over the past 5 years, we've had some pretty significant impact. And, I think that is reflected in programs and policies at the Department of Ag and other departments, and ways that federal funds hit Minnesota in recent years and supported local and regional food systems. MinneAg has 35 organizations as a part of the network who share those values and our core pillars, which we'll talk about. We have a listserv that has over 260 people on it, and it's something that, especially during the legislative session, is very active with action alerts and bill alerts on when topics are going to be coming up in hearings and when there's moments that it will be important for people to engage. We are seen as a valued partner in community input. Like Laura was saying, the Department of Ag often coordinates with us to do a listening session on budget priorities when they're setting their departmental budget priorities. And we're seen as, one of the key groups of organizations that they want to talk to. We bring in expert guest speakers during our biweekly calls. We'll talk more about how we do this and about those calls if you're not familiar, to give us, up-to-date information on key and emerging issues. Or understand processes. We had a great session with one of the revisers and really talked about how you how do you actually get your idea into bill language, which was, I think, really illuminating for many of us who are not as familiar with that process. And then we have seen increased legislative engagement. When we were preparing for this webinar, we were feeling badly about ourselves that we hadn't tracked how many letters of support sort of came through the MinneAg network over the years. But we know that we see that there are letters of support or, otherwise that that are activated through the network that wouldn't be there, that legislators wouldn't have in their packet when they meet on a bill, if it weren't for the work of this network to highlight those issues, to educate partners, in the space about why that's important to engage on. And I think fundamentally, democracy is a participatory process. I've always felt really strongly about our democracy, even more so now, of course. And it is not always the most glamorous to go to hearings or tune in on YouTube and watch testimony, but it is incredibly important and it is a privilege. And it's something that is worth defending and fighting for. And I think that that's another value of MinneAg, is that, we have a government of citizens, of residents and community members, and we should participate in it and make sure that it's strong and continues in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks, Ariel. And yeah, so getting into our pillar priority areas and what are kind of the core values that are driving this network and what connects us all. So I know some of you were a part of this process, but back in 2021, we had done a number of group meetings, had folks fill out priority workbooks and surveys, trying to understand what are the priorities that we all really want to be moving forward together at the legislature. And this is something that, we've revisited the last couple of years to continue to make sure these feel right for the network. And when people formally join on as MinneAg members, we ask them that they're, saying that they align with these values and support. So getting into them. So first, really around climate and ecosystems, how can we leverage Minnesota's agricultural system to create positive climate benefits? And how are we, for ecosystem impacts, looking at pollinators, continuous living cover, Forever Green Initiative, those are some of the bills and things that fall within that area that we want to see advanced and moving forward. Secondly, increasing capacity for investments in infrastructure, especially for small and mid-sized processing and market development statewide. We know that a lot of our communities, are either growing food to be able to sell at farmers market, CSA, and then be able to take that a step further. How do we actually have the processing and infrastructure available to grow it out in the state? And we've been seeing, especially with some things with farm to school, the food hubs have been a huge part in making that possible. But how do we continue to grow and make that all parts of our state can access? Thirdly, land access and farm viability, especially for emerging farmers. How are we equipping the next generation of farmers to be successful and have access to land and capital? So this group, I feel we've been really active on the farmland down payment assistance program and supporting that and making sure that more farmers, especially BIPOC farmers, have access to land. And one of the things was looking at the legislative report for the down payment assistance program. And the first year they had, I think it was 3 BIPOC farmers that had access to land, and now through the grants. And now this year we're up to 14 BIPOC farmers. So I think, that's a pretty impressive, even if it's small numbers, it's moving in the right direction. And I think this group can take a lot of the credit for moving that needle and making sure that our prioritization is reaching the people who need it most. And then lastly, linking nutrition and food access needs to Minnesota's egg producers. So how are we, supporting efforts like Farm to Food Shelf or LEAF, and really creating markets that for our farmers, but also taking care of our communities and making sure that everyone has access to food as well. So I will pass it to, I think, Erin's next.
Yeah, so the reason for our webinar today, I am so excited to share our new resources that we've developed over the last couple of years. And these really came out of needs that our members had expressed. And especially, we were sharing a lot of really good information, as has been mentioned in our meetings, but it wasn't preserved in a permanent way where people could go back and access it. And especially the orientation information, kind of letting people know the basics about how the system works and where there are opportunities to engage. We wanted to preserve that information in more durable resources and also think about our role as MinneAg within the wider ecosystem of farm and food systems engagement in Minnesota. We wanted to develop a solid voice and a recognized visual identity to really make sure that people could distinguish what things were from us. So we knew that we wanted to make these resources for our members, and we sought funding for that and were able to get a USDA Regional Food System Partnerships grant in 2023. So it started in the fall of 2023 and was set to run through the fall of 2025. And it was supporting the resource creation and civic engagement orientation for our members. We had a partner engagement process to figure out what were the resources that people wanted and where were their gaps and how could we create basically we were thinking about it kind of like if you know Schoolhouse Rocks, like a Schoolhouse Rocks set of resources for Minnesota Ag Policy 101. And we also were really excited. We had MinneAg interns for the first time last year in 2025. We had Megan Anderson and Molly McMullen. They provided a lot of extra capacity to help us get these resources drafted as well. I will say there was a big challenge for this project in that last spring in 2025, we found out that our grant from USDA was abruptly terminated. And this was like 3/4 of the way through the grant. So it was at a difficult stage to have our grant terminated as we had the drafts of the resources created by then with a lot of partner input. But we still needed to finalize those drafts and then get them translated and then do all the graphic design, layout and things, publish them and promote them. That was what was left for that last quarter of our grant. And we felt that the termination of our grant from USDA was not justified. And we did end up joining with other organizations to sue the administration for that. And we did win that lawsuit. So our grant was reinstated in August, which was really wonderful because this is very important work. And we were, 75% of the way there. We had done all this work leading up to it. So we really wanted to get it across the finish line and get these resources out to you all. It was very challenging because when the grant was reinstated, we only had like a month left before the end of the grant term, and they did reject our request to have a no-cost extension to make up for that lost time. So it was a very tight turnaround to get things done, but we did do it. So we were able to get all of that down and get the core set of resources completed. We did have to give up some of the components where we had hoped to make additional issue-specific resources. So that is a future goal that hopefully we can do. But it was quite a journey to get these out there. And that is why the timeline for sharing them with you all was a little bit delayed. So now I'm so excited to be able to share them with all of you. If we go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about our process. So one of the first steps in this was hiring a graphic designer. And we ended up working with Christina Vang of LeBang Studio, and she's a local graphic designer. We were very excited because we had the goal of both creating these resources and doing like creating a new logo and visual identity and the templates for the resources. And then another component was overhauling our website. And Christina had the skills to do both of those things. So we ended up working with her for both of those components. And I'll just put in a plug. She's super organized. She's super professional. Her work is beautiful. I really recommend working with her. And actually, if one of my colleagues could drop in the link, you can see her website and learn more about her work. She was also really great to work with because she, like MinneAg, really enjoys a participatory process. And she led, some of you I know were engaged in that process as well. She had some group work with us in our meetings and then had some feedback surveys of our members to think about like what do you want to express in this visual identity and make sure that it really aligned with who we feel we are. And she developed a new logo which we just love, and some of the background of that, something that I love about it, it kind of represents our 4 pillar priorities and also looks a little bit like a bird's eye view looking down at a farm. It has the different components of maybe like some growing foods and vegetables and maybe row crops as well and water. So, and it's very organic and lovely. And she had very intentional ideas about all of the color choices and things as well. So the logo was one of the first things that she developed, and then the other visual components came out of that initial logo design as well. So we also have like a core font that we use and color scheme and things that we'll have in all of our new resources. So very cool process to be able to do that. And it really will set our stuff apart so you can tell like, oh, this is a MinneAg document. This is, coming from a group that I recognize. So I'll pass it to Laura to get into the actual things that we published.
Yeah, so this was, like Erin said, quite a process, but so happy to have these resources available now. So I'll put quickly a link in the chat for where you can find this on our website. But yeah, these resources were created, wanting, like we were saying earlier, how to break down legislative process and make it easier to understand how you can engage in our democratic systems. So we have my first one, how a bill becomes law. So thinking School Rock, and breaks down that process and have links to the like revisor's office, different statutes that will be helpful to check out and understand. And for like, contacting your legislator, how can you find your legislator, giving you entry point and script to kind of use for how to contact them, and either requesting a meeting or sharing your opinion and insight on a bill that might be coming up. One of the resources that I personally wish I would have had 4 years ago was the Navigating the Minnesota Capitol. So that's a nice one if you've never been to St. Paul before, or bringing groups of people with you and be able to navigate the different buildings within the Capitol and how to get to hearing rooms and that kind of thing. And then also have policy process resources. So this can help if folks, especially if they have an idea or want to be making a change to either a program or policy, how do you actually go about that? And yeah, this has been incredibly helpful just to like orientate people for, something that can feel incredibly overwhelming, but trying to break it down step by step for how we can engage in these different processes. So this is kind of civic engagement 101 resources. So this is, a space to check out if you are wanting to kind of get that initial first step and familiarity with policy work. And then if we go to the next slide, we also have how-to guides. So wanting to break it down for, okay, if I know a bill is coming up, we say like on MinneAg moment that there's going to be a hearing next week, and you're interested in writing a letter of support, how do I actually do that? So have different resources around how to write a letter of support that you can submit to the committee that legislators are get in their bill packets and be able to read. And it really does make a difference for people to be submitting those letters of support. Because usually, there can be a number, say 8 or 9 bills on one given day. But if legislators see like, oh, okay, there was 6 or 7 letters submitted on this one bill, like this must be important or people are excited about this. So it can kind of be a good indication of this is important to people outside this hearing, and give a little bit more time and attention. We also have how to testify. So, how to tell your story and how a bill or policy can impact you and your either organization or farm, and thinking through some different prompts of like how to have a really impactful testimony. And this has already been helpful for me, even just sharing with some of our members that are going to be talking to like their legislators or preparing for, the session and bill hearings. And then we have some editable templates that if you have issues that you're interested in sharing with your base or members, you can edit these templates to fit for your issue areas that you're working on. So, for example, if you are working around land access, can have like a brief summary and then be able to utilize that so it can stay within the MinneAg fonts and logos and design, but make it useful for the priorities that you're working on. So yeah, if there are additional questions or as people are looking through these resources, would definitely welcome feedback or things that could be helpful. And or if this is like, this is great, this is helping meet the mark, that's also great feedback for us to be hearing. So yeah, that definitely invite people to click into the website and look through those different resources, and please share with your networks as well, because we really want these resources to get out there and be useful. So yeah, if you have any questions about those, we can talk about those later too.
Yeah, and then we did mention the MinneAg Moment, which was an addition last year during session, which was a biweekly newsletter that was a little bit more formalized than what we had previously been doing. So this goes out on the listserv, which if you're not on the listserv already, you can join. There's the information on how to join the listserv is on the website, which is MinneAg.org. And as Erin mentioned, we had 2 fantastic interns last spring who really made the MinneAg Moment their own and made it happen. And this had all sorts of good information on upcoming hearings, things that were happening certainly last spring, a lot of federal news and impacts. And it's just a great way to keep track of what's going on. We have our network meetings on Fridays that are on Zoom and happen, live like this. And then on the other Fridays, the MinneAg Moment goes out, and so keeps that information sharing going without having to meet quite as much. And for people who can't join those meetings, we do try to keep any sort of key action items or information reported in the MinneAg Moment. And it also has, the great branding and comes out. I think what's interesting about the listserv, just to say, is like, and it is a listserv, so we want people to use it and send out information. But when you see something coming from the MinneAg Moment, that's from the network coordinators and a little bit more of the official, whatever information that we're sharing. But really encourage people to use the listserv and reply to the listserv to start conversations and share information. And I always really enjoy seeing what people are elevating, and maybe things are happening in other committees that we aren't all aware of, and it's really helpful to know.
Now, one of our other big priorities for this project was to be able to translate the resources that we were producing into multiple languages to make information more accessible to stakeholders, especially for our community of immigrant farmers. So all of the resources that we created are translated into Hmong, Somali, and Spanish. And then I also, in addition to the published resources, the standalone resources, We also overhauled our website and made sections of our website specifically that are like landing pages in Hmong, Somali, and Spanish. So if you go there, you'll see like right at the top, you can just click on the language and it'll have the landing page that has the links to these specific resources in the different languages on that same landing page as well. And I was so excited because we were able to get these done on the initial parts of the resources done to be able to share them at the Emerging Farmers Conference in the fall. And it was just so awesome to have them. I feel like it was a real gap in our own resources and then just resources available generally. So I really hope that they're useful to community members. I hope that all of you can share them with your own multilingual partners and let us know too. At that conference, there were additional languages that were being used by attendees at that Emerging Farmers Conference. And I was just thinking like, okay, in our next round of, if we can get funded again, we can do those issue specific resources and we can also try to add a couple more languages. So if you have feedback on that about your community and what languages you think would be useful, please let us know. It's really, really exciting to have these ready. And then we also were thinking about the visual identity in general, not only with our logo and kind of the color scheme and all of that, but we didn't actually have a really great just handout that articulated what MinneAg is. So we now have one of those. And then we worked with another wonderful local artist, Katrina Kubetsko, and she did this awesome design for us, and we printed some logos with her design. So we have this ag policy rooted in community tote bag, and we had those at the Emerging Farmers Conference as well. And we will be sharing that swag at some of our future in-person events too. So keep an eye out if you want to snag one of those.
Awesome. And yeah, legislative session is just right around the corner. So it starts February 17th, a Tuesday. So a little bit later this year than last year, starting in January. And just to give a little context and framing for what we might be expecting this year. So it is a non-budget year. So meaning policy is going to be the focus. And with the December forecast, still seeing some poor budget projections, so not necessarily expecting a lot of money to be available and be able to be spent. I know in conversations already with legislators, like yes, it's going to be a pretty much strictly policy year, and thinking about playing defense for a lot of our priorities. Also, just other things that are happening, of course, with the impacts at the federal level, both cuts to healthcare, SNAP, but now ICE enforcement and presence here in Minnesota. How can we attend to that? And then ongoing in the background has also been, conversations around fraud too. So like that's part of the defense calculus as well. Like how can we protect the programs that we know are really important and vital for our communities, and making sure that legislators know that they are utilized and need to stay safe and continuing on. And then also November 2026 is going to be a very busy year. It's an election year. We have almost all state seats up, and then Senate, and then also the governor's race as well. So there's a lot of things vying for legislators' time and attention. So at least how I've been hearing it from some legislators is may not be the most productive session in some respects. So I think this is a year to really be continuing to share more broadly, like what we need as a community and what's important, and knowing that next year is a budget year. So how can we setting ourselves up well for when we do have money available, and continue to be making relationships and strengthening those connections with legislators and allies, and also continuing, because we know there's a lot of newer legislators to the Agriculture Committee, for example. So be reaching out and building those relationships because they're also learning too about agriculture in Minnesota and all the different wide spectrum that is. I can only share last week had met with Representative Gottfried, and he was one of the special elections last year. Is in the Roseville area. And he's like, I don't know that much about agriculture, but I'm always a willing student and interested to learn as much as possible. So I think, one of the things that MinneAg we can be doing is positioning ourselves as a resource to these legislators. We're connected to communities and farmers that they may not know about in Minnesota. So really invite people to utilize those resources that we share to be able to continue to build those connection points and move our priorities forward collectively together.
Fantastic. So session starts February 17th. It's coming up. And MinneAg will be convening as we have been for the past many years. And we would love to see you all on our biweekly calls and on our listservs and at other in-person meetings as well. So our biweekly meetings start next Friday, February 13th. They run from noon to 1 and they're on Zoom. Just like this, we often have a speaker who gives some context on a certain topic. And then we will have time for sort of group updates and just sort of whoever has something to share. We go through our pillar priority areas and sort of look at what's going on and look at the calendar and make sure that everyone has information that they need. They're a great way to stay informed and get to know each other and make sure that our priorities are being elevated. The MinneAg Moment is the newsletter that I already talked about. So hopefully you are already on the listserv, and if not, sign up for that. It's a great way. We also send out reminders about the biweekly meetings on the listserv, so you can you won't forget it. We have a new MinneAg intern, and actually, Erin, maybe you want to talk about that one because I have not met that person yet.
Yeah, so we have Abiha Kashif starting next week. We only have one intern this time around, but she is fantastic, and I'm very excited for her to get started. So you will get to know her. I'll have her introduce herself when she is at the meeting next Friday. But yeah, she's wonderful. She's a student, and she is very knowledgeable and competent, and I think she's going to be great for this position.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to meeting her. And then we will be doing a workshop at the Duluth Food Justice Summit, which is at the end of March in Duluth, as it says in the name. And it will be similar to this presentation, talking about the resources that MinneAg has and the sort of idea of how to engage in policy processes, even if you don't have a whole policy shop at your organization. And we're really looking forward to being part of that discussion and group of people thinking about food justice. And then we are going to have a MinneAg in-person meeting on April 29th from 3 to 4:30 at the Capitol. Erin, do you want to share any more about that, or is it a stay tuned and we'll be sharing more as we get closer to the date?
We will share more as we get closer, but I think our vision of what the event will be like, so it will actually be at the Capitol and in that basement room of the rotunda, if you've ever been in there. I think we'll have some partners who can share as a kind of formal panel looking at climate resilient agriculture in Minnesota and initiatives happening around that. But then we'd also like to do a little bit of an open house fair where MinneAg members can kind of table and share about all of your priorities that you're working on. And we'll invite legislators to that part. And we hope to have some kind of good Minnesota local food snacks and hors d'oeuvres as well. So stay tuned for more information on that.
Fantastic. And then just the final couple things here. So, sign up and stay in the loop. Again, that information is on minneag.org. And consider formal organizational membership. So, just to state again, MinneAg is really focused on organizations and making sure that organizations that are working in the space are connected and have capacity to engage. Of course, individuals are welcome and participate in our meetings and our listserv conversations. But to become a listed organizational member of MinneAg is a great opportunity to show that your organization shares these values and is part of this process. So you can see on our website the organizations that have signed up to be formally listed, and that helps us too when we're talking to legislators or other decision makers about what this group is and that it is this sort of wide group of stakeholders working on everything from urban agriculture and community food systems to climate smart ag and hunger relief. And it's a lot of us, and we all care about the same things, and these priorities are important to all of us. So if you're part of an organization that's not already formally part of MinneAg, please consider that and reach out to Erin or Laura or myself if you want to have a further conversation about that. All right, so I think we are at the point where we're ready for questions, comments. If people have their own experiences that they want to share with working with MinneAg or want to know more, you can use the chat. You can come off mute. I do see. Thanks, Michael, for your comment about the event on April 4th. We will follow up on that. That's fantastic. Yeah.
I will also, I'm just going to launch a little feedback survey, and I will be transparent that this is partially about our grant report that we have to do and report back on, but we also have some questions just to find out about what you're wanting to learn this session. If you have recommendations about speakers or topics that you'd like us to highlight, or people you want to invite, you'd like us to invite to share on certain hot topics, please go ahead and put that in the poll as well. But otherwise, we're just asking, like, is this helpful to you? Do these resources seem like they would help you? And it's written in a little bit of an odd way just because of the way that the grant requirement asks us to report back. So sorry if it's a little awkward, but I'd love to get feedback from attendees too. And I'll leave that open as we can go into questions. I'll leave it open for just a couple of minutes here. Maybe we covered it all.
Well, I think that it would be important to stage some open roundtable discussions. This is Michael Cheney Project Sweetie Pie. So that, again, anybody out here in farm country, urban, suburban, rural, that might have some ideas, novel efforts underway that we could recruit and summon to the broader community some legislative agendas that might be added to the broader slate.
Yeah, thank you. And you're thinking of kind of smaller group sort of feedback and brainstorming to find out what priorities to support?
Well, I think reaching out to your folks that are part of MinneAg, as well as any other large entities that are, united we stand, divided we fail. And so, whatever efforts, not making the assumption that we've got all the great ideas already bottled, packaged, ready to be presented, but using especially this as a strategy to build partnership, to recruit members to MinneAg, to really create a ongoing venue and device that would welcome and help massage ideas that need some development, that needs help in crafting language in order to move forward the bill. And so they might be a Zoom conversations, a session that would be distributed far and wide where people could help bake the pie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I really love that. I do think I'm remembering back when MinneAg was first starting, we had this vision of hiring community-based people and hosting meetings that were dispersed throughout the state to kind of gather input and things like that. That sounds kind of similar to what you're talking about. And I feel like that would still be really worthwhile if we could raise funding to be able to do that. Um, I love that idea. I'll also say too, like the way that our meetings are structured, we have those pillar priorities. And if you have a bill that you've been supporting and you want to bring it to the group, it's open for members to come and share about bills that you know are passing through or that need support or that you want to block, that are related to any of those pillar priorities. So it is an open space that we would love for all of you to highlight bills so that other people might not know that they're happening, but you can share about them as well. And I'm going to close this poll so it's not still in your way here. Thank you, Michael.
We had a question in the chat from Josh, although he might have to hop off, but I think it's still good to ask. So how does MinneAg coordinate with other advocacy partners on messaging and actions? Laura, do you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. So like Erin said, like folks are able to raise like what bills that they're trying to move forward. So really utilizing this space as a time to get coordinated. So for instance, like in years past, when we have Friday meetings, if there's a bill coming up, we can kind of share or brainstorm together what type of messaging or questions have legislators previously asked around this, or what do we really want to make sure that we can shore up their support. So those Friday meetings are a great space to be coordinating and talking amongst each other, but also understand that that's not something that necessarily everyone can join in on. So, really welcome people to be utilizing the listserv of lifting up bills or actions that they're doing. But I think that Friday space is the time that we have the most concentrated time to have that dialogue and back and forth. Yeah. And then Josh, I see you have your hand up, or Joshua.
Yes, I was just starting to type it. But I have just two quick questions. One is the city of Minneapolis Homegrown published some really powerful studies in the third quarter and fourth quarter of last year, and they introduced some new vocabulary, I would say, to the lexicon, and one of which is in the study on urban agriculture and groceries. They talked about food apartheid,
Mm-hmm.
and how a combination of policy and city design, through multiple generations, have created the food insecurity, food desert. But they wanted to get away from using food desert because that implies it's a natural occurrence and not design. And I'm curious if, and maybe this is two questions I'll put together. I'm curious if there are any strategies that are, reaching across the aisle, because I'm sure that the same issue with the antitrust law not being enforced in the city hasn't been enforced in rural areas either. And there are food deserts in poor rural areas, just as there are in our urban areas. And I wonder if there is a strategy to reach across the aisle to put forth policy in that area, and or if there even is an introduction of any new vocabulary on the state side when it comes to being able to analyze and capture and communicate what has occurred. And then, just so I don't have to interrupt or repeat or say anything after, I'll say the second question too is, do you have a grassroots game? Do you have a grassroots strategy? But I'll put myself on mute.
What do you think about policies reaching across the aisle? I don't know, Ariel or Laura, if you have ideas on that.
Yeah, well, I think that's where you identified. I think, grocery access is something that is of a concern to legislators from both parties. Rural and urban places are seeing the loss of grocery stores, and yeah, appreciate the nuance between a food desert and food apartheid. That these are policy decisions that have led to these conditions. I'll say from farmers unions perspective, our experience, we have an anti-monopoly program, and I don't work on that specifically, but my colleagues have been leading a lot of work on price discrimination bills and better enforcement of antitrust laws that would make a more level playing field for independent grocery stores. So would love to connect with you more on that if that's something you're working on as well. And good to know that Homegrown Minneapolis is thinking about grocery as well. I am not a Minneapolis resident, so I haven't been following that as well. And then maybe just on the grassroots piece, I think again, like ideally, the organizations involved in MinneAg are organizations of grassroots, member-based organizations. We have a plethora of grassroots member-based organizations in Minnesota that represent and have strong ties within their communities. And then this is a place where those organizations can work together to elevate and advance shared values and goals. That being said, I think this is also a great space for individuals who are concerned about these issues, who want to learn more or connect and be part of these conversations. So it's a both and. Yeah. Laura or Erin?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add to your first question, Joshua, is wanting we work in a bipartisan way, so always reaching out to both sides of the aisle to move these issues forward. So yeah, I just wanted to share that, always trying to continue conversations and how can we show that these issues that are impacting rural spaces are also the same issues kind of happening in urban, and a lot of our policy decisions are really, more broadly impacting poor working people. So how do we have that as the joiner? And think that's something that food is a great way to level set that with people too. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think on the collaborating with other spaces and grassroots piece, we do have the membership-based organizations that are part of MinneAg, and then we also participate in some of the other spaces like the Partners to End Hunger Coalition or the powerful work happening at the Metro Food Justice Network. So we do try to learn from what those groups are doing. And I think one of the important things about this group in general was the idea that we do need to collaborate and coordinate amongst these groups, because there was a situation previously where many of us were working on our own little bills, but we might have we do have aligned visions for the big picture of the farm and food system for Minnesota that we'd like to see. And we don't want to be pitted against each other. We want to have an opportunity to coordinate and be more effective as a coalition, and be in solidarity with other groups. So absolutely, it's a very important part of our strategy. And we do want to grow that as well. And I see Devon, our network weaver, is raising her hand. And then I know we're at time, so we'll wrap up after that.
Great, Erin. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erin. Won't take much time. I know we're focused on Minnesota, but my work, I'm always thinking about our regional approach. And so you'll hear some of that in our conference, but also, dare I say, are we going to get a farm bill? I'm just going to say it because I've worked on national policy too, international policy. At some point, we will need another one. So let's not forget, because we will need federal policy that will support what we're doing here in our state at some point. At some point. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I know I see a couple of people on the line today that are part of the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and are going to meet with our legislators in DC talking about the Farm Bill and the need to have an actual federal policy that's supporting our farmers. We have had not everybody who's part of MinneAg works on federal policy. So we are set up mostly as a state policy group, but we do have a lot of us who do both. And so we've had these subgroup meetings where we do connect with others who are working on federal level policy, because there's a lot of need for coordination there as well.
Yes. Thank you, Erin. I would love to get plugged in. Thanks so much for taking the question. Have a great day.
Awesome. Okay, I know we're at time here, so I think we're a little over time. We'll wrap up there, but we're so excited to share all of these resources with you. It's so heartening just to see all the people in this space together, especially in this very dark time for our state. And it gives me a lot of hope that there are so many helpers working on trying to make things better. And we hope that we can be part of all of you being able to access the spaces to make change, and coming up in the legislative session starting very soon. So please do join us in our biweekly meetings, sign up for our newsletter. I hope that you will all be there and part of these decision-making spaces, but we really appreciate you. And I hope you're taking care of yourselves, taking care of your communities as best you can. It really is meaningful to see you all taking the time to come here, even with everything going on right now. So thank you, my friends, and thanks to my co-coordinators today, and we will see you all very soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.